You got challenges that you're going to run across.
He would, as he was taking the orders and listening in, he would go in the back and write down some of the stuff he heard from the guys sitting at the table, because that's where the information was. And after a while, he became successful just taking that information that he gathered in this private club, because the club was $100,000 a year to join, to be a part of it. And so, and I tell people all the time, the $100,000 is not racism. It's not trying to keep. It's just that they want to keep the same mindset of people. They don't want Bubba in there saying, "Well, how you gonna do that?" If you had $100,000 to put in, 9 times out of 10, your thought process is kind of the same as everybody else. And so that environment that you're in, it kind of gives you, information. He took it and became successful in life from that. I don't know if you heard that story, but I know that you probably operate that way from getting, information.
I do, and I think that ties back to your mental toughness. You have to find a way to be creative to make sure that the opportunities aren't passing you by, because there's some people don't want you involved, right? It just happens. H.J. Russell used to talk about him being a black man in Atlanta years ago when black weren't supposed to own property. And this man HJ had to find a way to turn the little money that he'd earned shining shoes into profit so that he could buy property. And he got creative and started using some of his white friends and said, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna pay you a little extra, but I need you to buy this property from me until we can kind of get the paperwork and the names and everything situated." Creativeness. I mean, he had to get creative to get over this challenge. And that was when you talk about mental toughness, man. People will discriminate you based on race. They'll discriminate you based on income. They'll discriminate against you based on the way you have your haircut. I mean, they don't care if they don't want you there. They will find a way to try to box you out. But mental toughness says you got to find a way. If that's where you want to be, you got to find a way to get in.
Mm-hmm. Story from one of my favorite books, John H. Johnson book, his autobiography. And, people don't really read as much as they used to. I don't know if social media has something to do with that, when they cut back on the words, and now we barely now, typing enough and got to get everything in this little paragraph now. So, but, I remember at one point I was book after book after book after book, and John H. Johnson book really paused me for a minute, because his story was so deep about how he came, I think, from Mississippi, damn near walked to Chicago to get there, because he wanted to start a new life, his family, his mother. But he started a business, and people who don't know, because some of the younger folks might not understand what John H. Johnson started, Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine, and, a lot of other things that he started. One of his stories in there was that there was a building downtown Chicago that he wanted to buy, and the white guy wouldn't sell it to him. It was strictly racism. He just would not sell in that building. He wanted to build it. And the risk that he had to take goes back to the mental toughness thing, was that he had a friend of his who, he assumed was a friend, and he found out later that the guy was really his friend because he was a white guy. And he went to him with that strategy. And the white guy told him, he said, "Man, let me buy it. I'll go down there and buy it, and I'll sell it back to you." So John H. Johnson gave him the money, no agreement or anything, just, trusted him on it. He went straight to the building where the guy said the building went for sale, bought the building, and turned around and sold it back to John H. Johnson for $1 or something like that. And they were buddies. They became, good friends and, all that kind of stuff. But that mental toughness thing, that elite psyche that he had to keep going when you run out of options. Because most people would have just, went to the paper, he's racist, and, I'm just not going to, sometimes you might have to do that. But at that point, he was like, "Man, I want this building. I have the money, and I shouldn't have to go this route, but I'm going to go this route." You know what I'm saying? And that's what happened to him. So that thing about, just keep fighting and keep going and keep, swinging until you get to that point to where I think Les tells a story about how, he says, God says, man, let this guy through because he keep climbing the wall, he hopping the gate, he climbing under the gate, he's doing everything. And, he sees that you're not going to give up. And so you go through it. And that's the whole point of doing, these interviews that I'm doing. I've talked to a couple of guys that played in the NFL, and that tells you, that's 1.5 or 1% that ever get to the league, let alone, you think about how many play in high school, how many play in college, and then you narrow that thing down to 7 rounds, and then you get a few, and then now you're in the NFL. That takes not only just physical confidence, you need the mental, not physical confidence, but physical qualities that you need to win. But you also need that mentality and that mental stuff to be tough because, you battling against some of the best people in the world. Some of the, like when people say all the time, but, you could take Alabama and they can beat one of the NFL teams. That ain't going to happen. You dealing with the best talent in the world, mentally and physically.
That's right.
So you're not going to do that. But that made me think about that story of just going by any means necessary, making this thing work. And, anybody successful has done that. This question here, I had a question that I was talking to a young lady. She's an entrepreneur. She's sharp. And I eventually I want to interview her too. And we kind of went back and forth and battling a little bit on this question because she was adamant about success and being an entrepreneur and being a winner. She says that you got to be born with that skill. You can't put it in a person. You just can't. It's got to be there. You see it you even see it as a baby growing up. You see some of the things that you're doing. What do you believe about that? As for being an entrepreneur or just having success, are you destined for this thing because of who you are, or can some of those things be added to you, or is it just you either a winner as an entrepreneur or you're not?
No, I feel that success is universal. Anybody who wants it can obtain it. They can have it. They just can't have it right now. It takes work. It takes process. And we're not all starting from the same starting point, right? I think they said Donald Trump started with his father giving him like a small loan of $100 million or something like that. That's not common. And that's not what, but for most folks, you come up and you're looking at other people who have, and you may not have, but if you want it, you put a process in place and you work it and you work it and work it, and you'll start to get some small wins. And then as those small wins turn into bigger wins, you'll start to realize, man, I kind of like winning. I like this habit of winning. I'm going to continue along this path. And once you get to that point where winning is an addiction, you won't want to stop until you win.
Make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the all button and all that kind of stuff, because we're going to have a lot of good interviews on this podcast.